All right, you guys, welcome. I am so honored to be with you guys today. I feel like there are so many new faces and I can't wait to meet you all. And I'm a hugger, so I wish I could hug you. But in the meantime, I'll just stare at you guys all awkwardly. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me here. When the leadership team emailed me and asked, like, okay, which one of the 7 deadly sins do you want to talk about? I was like, envy. I want that one because that one is a real struggle. The struggle is so real with envy. It follows you everywhere in every life stage. And I'm like, I'm taking that one. So I am honored to share this space with you guys tonight. Thank you so much, Kevin, for that awesome intro, and for Bosung for leading us in worship. The fact that you guys are showing up matters. I know it's really hard to do everything on Zoom. We've been in this pandemic for over a year now. I don't remember the last time I had a friend over at our house, and we love hosting normally. So it's a hard time. This is a very trying time. And I think, since we're already a year into this, it's tiring and we don't want to do it anymore. But at the same time, our hearts yearn for community, and our hearts yearn for people and just fellowship. So the fact that you guys are here tonight is an investment into your soul. So I just want to say thank you for showing up tonight. So a little bit more about me. I am 37 years old, turning 38 this year. I am a Bay Area native. I came to the States when I was a month old. I was supposed to be born in the States, but my mom was too pregnant and they wouldn't let her on the plane to immigrate here. So I'm technically born in Hong Kong. And then I came to San Jose when I was a month old. And then I also spent part of my childhood in Fremont. So I went to San Jose State. I'm a San Jose State alum. And as Kevin had mentioned, I am married to a guy named Joe. If you don't know him yet, you'll get to meet him probably sometime this quarter. He's a really funny and crazy guy, but he has a huge heart for the Lord. We met on Hawaii Summer Project in 2005. And we dated in 2007, got married in 2008. So it'll be 13 years of marriage for us this year. And we have 2 kids, a son named Micah and a daughter named Avery. So that's a little bit about me and my upbringing. In regards to what I do for work, when I graduated in 2005, it was during the downturn of the economy. So what you guys are experiencing right now, as well as graduating seniors or people who just graduated, it's tough looking for a job when the economy is really shaky and fragile. That was my experience graduating. It was hard for me to find a job. My first job out of college was this after school educational center job. It had terrible hours. I worked Monday through Saturday from 2 p.m. until 10 p.m. every day. And I just had no social life because everyone else was off of work by 6 and I was working until 10. I had a really negative experience. I was thinking man, I wish I was still in college. This sucks. I don't want to work. And it wasn't until 10 months into the job, I was doing a parent teacher conference. And this parent actually recruited me at the parent teacher conference. She was like, you know what? I want you to work for my company. I think you would be a perfect HR person at this tech company I work at. So she hired me and I switched careers and I started doing HR and tech for about 8 years. And then I had my firstborn, Micah. And then a year after he was born, I became a stay-at-home mom. So I've been a stay-at-home mom for 9 years now, and I haven't looked back since. And as Kevin mentioned, I do work part-time. I volunteer for Epic Legacy. It's a post-grad ministry to help support people in transition. It's just such a jarring experience when people move from college into the work world, because even if you end up moving home, or even if you end up seeing people you grew up with, God has transformed you in college. So when you go back home, you most likely won't be the same person who first left for college. So it can be really stressful. It can be very overwhelming. So Epic Legacy is just a space for us to provide support, love, comfort, and to just remind you that you're not alone in this process and that there are people here who care for you and want to see you succeed and flourish, not only in your work, but also in your spiritual walk. So that's what I do part-time. Just 3 get to know me random facts. 1, I have a huge phobia for Play-Doh. I hate it. I hate the smell of it, the touch, everything. And of course, God gave me kids who love Play-Doh. So ever since they were little, they knew that they had to be in charge of cleaning up. They had to play with it outside in the backyard. Like, I just can't stand around it. Like, I just can't stand being around that stuff. And then another random fact about me is that I found out I have a missing toe joint, which is really random, but I didn't know that until I was married to Joe, and he was giving me a foot massage when I was pregnant with Micah, and he's like bending my toes and like stretching my feet. Is this gross? I don't even know. But he was like, I think you're missing a joint in your 4th toe on your right foot. And I'm like, no, there's no way, because I know my body. Okay. I know that I have 10 fingers and toes. He's like, no, you're missing a joint. And first, like, there it was. Like, my 4th toe doesn't bend the same way as the rest of my toes. So that's another fact about me. And the 3rd fact is I have something called celiac disease, which is something that I was diagnosed with 3 years ago. I'm allergic to gluten, which is found in wheat, barley, and rye, which is also found in soy sauce, dim sum, Chinese food, bread, pasta, cakes, all the good stuff that I used to binge on, I can no longer have. So that was an adjustment in itself, but at least I don't fart as much anymore. So that's always a good thing. So those are 3 get to know me facts. I would love to connect with you outside of this meeting. I'm on social media, so find me. It's Kim Stipation. So it's like constipation, but with Kim in the front. So Kim Stipation, you can look for me on Instagram, or you can connect with me on Facebook, but I'm not on that as much. So yeah, so that's more about me. Okay, now the topic of envy, one of the 7 deadly sins. And why is it so important for us to talk about envy? When I was thinking about this talk and preparing for it, I came up with 4 reasons that I wanted to share with you guys tonight. 1, it's important to talk about envy because we need to recognize its history. Struggles with envy are all over the Bible. I mean, you think about Jacob and Esau, they were already envious of each other when they were in the womb. They were born in rivalry. We think about Leah and Rachel, 2 sisters who were married to Jacob. One was fertile, the other one struggled with infertility. And then, I thought about the prodigal son and even the brother of the prodigal son, how prodigal son came back and the brother was like not happy at the fact that the father was throwing him a party. It is all over the Bible. And those are just like a few of the examples that popped up in my mind. A second reason why it's important for us to talk about envy tonight is because it's important for us to recognize its existence. Struggles with envy happen before we even touch down on earth, you guys. When our mothers were carrying us in their wombs, I bet many of them struggled with envy. They might have looked at someone in a magazine or even on TV and thought to themselves, how come that person looks so much better pregnant than I do? Or even when they were putting together your nursery or even planning all these little things for you, I bet there was a lot of comparison, And so when we were in the womb, envy already surrounded us. Envy and comparison, it travels with us from infanthood to childhood to teenage years to adulthood. It exists in every life stage. And a third reason why it's important for us to talk about envy is because it's important to recognize its power on us. Metrics, tests, awards, merits, recognition, like it's so easy to feel unworthy or insignificant when we're not the recipient of those awards. And these forms of measurement are used in so many aspects of our lives since we were little kids, from running marathons to even the school spelling bee. I remember I got 2nd place because I didn't spell ceiling right. And then the person who won 1st place, like her word was boomerang. And I just felt robbed. And there was all of these emotions. Like, I just remember that, and I was so envious of her 1st place medal. promotions at work, titles. I mean, it is all over, you know? And so we have to recognize that envy can be so powerful when we are focused on chasing after these things, because inside we might be struggling with feeling like we need to, build our worth upon these metrics. And the fourth reason why I think it's important for us to talk about envy tonight is because we need to recognize its detrimental effects on our souls. It blinds us from seeing God's work in our lives. It often leaves us feeling dissatisfied. It definitely robs us of joy. I'm sure you guys have heard that phrase before, like comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison and envy are like hand in hand. They're buddies, you know? It shrinks our perspective. We become very narrow-minded and narrow-focused. So when we are just like really focused on something that we don't have, that someone else seems to have, we don't see all the other things that God is working on in our lives. And then lastly, it can create a bitter heart. And I feel like when we dig ourselves into this hole of bitterness, it's so hard to climb out of. Not impossible, but you have to work extra hard to reverse the heaps of bitterness that you had stockpiled on your heart. So before I move further, I actually want to do an exercise with you guys. I want you guys, I don't know if I can switch this. Okay, I'm going to switch it to gallery view on my end. Okay, so I am going to ask you guys a question, and I want you guys to raise your hand where you are, okay? Raise your hand if you've ever felt envious of a family member. Okay. Raise your hand if you've ever felt envious of a classmate. How about if you've ever felt envious of a good friend or a best friend? Okay. How about if you've ever felt envious of someone who is in this ministry in Epic Slow? Yeah, see, this exercise I wanted us to do because I saw a lot of hands raised in each of the categories that I listed. And it's crazy how like envy can make an appearance in every single part of our lives. And it can exist in every circle of friendship, relationship, people group. Sadly, it doesn't discriminate, you know? So my goal for tonight is I hope that we can recognize envy, that we can be honest with ourselves and how envy might be playing a role in our lives right now. And I'm going to provide some application points so that we can learn to keep its sneaky voice at bay. Does that sound good? All right, let me go ahead and open us up in a word of prayer, and then we'll continue on. Father God, you saw the hands that were raised from those questions, but you know what's in our hearts, God. And I'm sure that as we are navigating through this really hard topic to talk about, that you might be stirring in some feelings of not guilt, but maybe some feelings of conviction, God. So I pray that tonight you will use this topic to really help us hone in on maybe some of the struggles that we've had with envy. I pray that this thing that like holds onto our hearts so tightly at times and prevents us from really moving forward. God, I pray that you will just break that chain, just renew our spirits, release any of the guilt or shame that we might be feeling as we reflect about this, God, because those feelings aren't from you. They're from the evil one, God. And the evil one only wants us to feel trapped and stuck where we are. But I know that you have the desire to break us free from any of these things, God. So I pray that tonight will be the night that you just touch down, speak to us, convict us, God, bring people alongside us to ask us those questions. And I pray that you will, yeah, God, just open up our hearts and heal us, give us comfort to any of the hurts or pains that, might have been inflicted from some sort of envy, God, in the past. I pray that you will, just help us grow tonight. So I pray all these in your name. Amen. All right, you guys. So my experience with envy. Okay, so when I was planning for this, I was like, okay, I have so many stories, but I only have a certain amount of time. So what am I going to talk about? First story, elementary school, second grade. There was this girl in my class who had a gold bracelet. She always wore the best dresses, and her hair was always in these perfect curls with like pigtails. And I felt like she flaunted her perfection, given that we were only in second grade. Like she kind of rubbed it, like that way. So she always flaunted this gold bracelet that she had on her wrist. And all the girls were envious of it in my class. One day she left it on the playground, and I remember I saw it. And instead of giving it back to her, I took it and I stuck it in my lunch bag. And then I brought it home. And then I didn't realize that my mom is the one who opens up the lunch bag, to clean it out every day after school. So she discovered it and she railed on me like a good old Chinese mom because she didn't know if it was real gold or not. Like, I don't know, it was gold, but I didn't know if it was like 14 karat gold or whatever. I'm hoping that it wasn't like real gold, given that it was given to a second grader, but who knows? So she dragged me back to school and I had to deliver it to the school secretary. And then I was completely mortified by the process. And I was definitely punished. And at the end, I was like, wait, I was envious of this gold bracelet, but man, that was totally not worth it. So that was like one of my first memories of being envious of someone, a girl in second grade. Now in high school, I feel like high school, man, that environment just fostered a ton of envy. Don't you guys think? Like back when I was in high school, which was like a long time ago, some of you guys were born when I was in high school. I remember like Valentine's Day telegrams, they were a thing. And people would look to see who got the most telegrams or who didn't get any telegrams. It was like a humiliating thing for many people who were not popular. There was like a source of envy on that day. Who got asked to a school dance, who didn't get asked, who got a new car for their sweet 16, who didn't get one, who drives a family's like minivan, that was totally me, who got into AP classes, who didn't, who got into a good college, who's going to community college. Like I feel like we were constantly ranked in high school. So an area of insecurity could easily take us down this rabbit hole of envy and comparison, which was like a huge part of my teenage years. And looking back, I wish I didn't wrestle with it so much, but that was just the reality of my high school experience. Even in adult life, you guys, you think that you would outgrow envy and comparison, but I can tell you right now, it is still very prevalent and it is still a part of my life. One example is home renovations. Okay, so here's a story. We moved into this house and I love our house. I'm so grateful for it, but there was something that I had always wanted to remodel. We have this metal pergola in our backyard and I wanted a new one. It was just kind of janky looking, but it was like very functional. It always keeps our stuff clean and like dry when it's raining. I wanted something prettier. And I had wanted it for a few years, but Joe said, no, we don't need it. Like function over fashion. Like he even used that analogy for a pergola, but my husband is like that. Like he just doesn't spend money if it works just fine. So I took that in the back of my mind. And of course, one of my friends moves into the neighborhood and she's a good friend. But it just seemed like anything that I wanted to do for my house that I had to hold off on, she just happened to want to do the same thing for her house. And she didn't have to hold back. Like she just went for it. And she got her new pergola. She got all these things that I had like Pinterested and like wished that one day I would get it done for my house. But she got it done like ASAP. And it was like so bad because I feel like she was my friend, but I felt like I was slowly closing off on her because she got a new pergola before I did. That is the power of envy, when all of a sudden, like a good friend of yours ends up being almost like an enemy just because you were yearning for something that he or she had. Even kids during the pandemic, right? My kids have been home with me for like a year and they're doing distance learning like you guys. And envy and comparison is very prevalent in that as well, where like you hear other families and their kids are doing just fine with distance learning. And with my kids, like Avery really struggled this year, and a lot of like hard things came out of this season. So even in adult life, comparison is a real struggle and envy is definitely there. Envy will always be in our lives. It can literally insert itself in every situation that we're in every life stage. So When we don't recognize envy, this is what happens when we don't recognize envy. It affects our relationships. We start to isolate ourselves. It affects our perspective. We can't help but feel dissatisfied of everything. It affects our livelihood. Sometimes we feel unmotivated when we're envious, honestly, because we're like, okay, well, it seems like everyone else has, what I want, and I'm still not getting it, so forget it, It affects our abilities to celebrate others. We just start to feel bitter. And when we don't recognize envy, we feel like all these other emotions instead. But the thing is, these emotions are not from God. They're from the evil one who is working really, really hard to turn our gaze away from the Lord. So it's good to do a heart check and to ask why. Like what am I envious of right now? And why do I feel that way? Like, why does this person or situation trigger me? Like, why am I feeling these things towards this person in regards to envy and comparison? Like, why do I have such a strong desire for this thing that someone else has? Like, why do I need that so much? Those are some good questions to ask, because sometimes when you dig a little bit deeper, you realize that maybe this thing that you really wanted isn't really what you need. But maybe there's some like inner hurts and pains that go far deeper into things that were unresolved in your childhood or even teenage years, or even something that happened to you recently. Maybe that's something that is a wound in your heart, and you think like, oh, maybe after I get this thing, it'll be just fine. But really, it's not what you need. So it's always good to ask those questions, like why? Like, why am I feeling this right now? Like, why am I struggling with envy in this season? It's good to pinpoint those triggers. So the focus passage that I wanted us to go into tonight is actually the prodigal son. So if you guys have your Bibles, feel free to open it up to Luke 15, 11 to 32. So Luke chapter 15, verses 11 to 32. I'll give you guys a couple seconds to flip the Bibles open. Oh, it makes me really happy to see that you guys still use like physical Bibles. I don't know. It's just that we visited a church, and I remember everyone was just on their phones, but I'm like old school. I like having like the physical Bible and flipping through the pages and stuff. So it's cool to see a lot of you guys still doing that. All right, Luke 15. Now I'm reading the NLT version, so it might be slightly different, but try your best to follow along, okay? All right. Jesus tells the parable of the lost son. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had two sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. Verse 13. A few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. Verse 17. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, well, at home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. Verse 20. So he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, Father, I have sinned against both you and heaven, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. But his father said to the servants, Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast. For the son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found. So the party began. Meanwhile, the older son in the field Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. Your brother is back, he was told, and your father had killed a fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return. The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, all these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And in all that time, you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf. His father said to him, look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found. Sorry, my kids are getting ready for bed, so all that screaming in the background, supposedly they're getting ready for bed, but we'll see about that. Okay, so we've heard this story plenty of times. I've read this a lot during my lifetime, but I feel like every time I read it, it's different because I feel like as I transition from life stage to life stage or situation to situation, this passage hits me differently. So I saw a couple of things in my commentary that the younger son technically was only supposed to get 1/3 of the estate, not half, since he was the younger son. That's just how it worked back then. But this showed his arrogant disregard for his father's authority because he was like, I want half. And his father actually gave him half of the estate. Now, this young man, I felt like, really desired worldly riches, and oftentimes our desire for worldly comfort is sometimes fueled by envy. And we saw the older brother, he was totally not stoked about his younger brother coming back and getting like a fattened calf and like a huge party thrown for him. You know, he was envious of his younger brother for receiving this lavish party when he was the one out in the fields and he was obedient and he did all the things that his father told him to do. Now, how often do we find ourselves struggling to celebrate others because of envy and comparison? You know, the thing is, we don't know what happens after this story. Like, we don't know what the older brother receives in the future. We don't know how their lives play out. But I think what we can know is that God will always be faithful if we fix our eyes on him. And if we feel satisfied by the Lord, then we don't need to chase after all these other things to affirm us. And the struggle with envy starts to like dwindle a little bit in us, and it frees us from that. So I have some applications that I want to share with you guys. Like, okay, how do we keep the voice of envy at bay? I know that from the things that I shared with you guys above, it's like kind of overwhelming because it's like, oh yeah, no, it's true. Envy is everywhere. I have struggled with it all my life. Like, I can definitely attest to that. It's something that I feel like will always be in my life. But I feel like there are ways where we can keep it under control and like hush it, you know, so that we don't let it have the pedestal. We don't give it the podium, but instead we're like, no, you get the back seat. So I feel like we can keep the voice of envy at bay by recognizing envy when it inserts itself in our daily lives. But how do we recognize it? We have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest about where we are, honest with like how we feel, taking the time to process all of that. I think sometimes it's so easy for us to just kind of like move on through our days and, you know, avoid it. Like, I don't want to have those thoughts. Like, I just want to move forward. But I feel like when we try to move forward without really honing in on like what's holding us back, we're not really moving forward at the end of the day. So that's why I think it's important for us to recognize envy. And so that when it inserts itself in different parts of our lives, we can actually like capture it and we can reconcile it and like shove it to the back. I think another way to keep the voice of envy at bay is by practicing gratitude. And practicing gratitude includes celebrating others, even if they got the thing that you really wanted, but they got it first. Man, when we practice, I know it sounds so silly to like practice celebrating, but when we really do practice celebrating others, we're helping our joy grow. And you can influence that. Like we can receive joy from the Lord, but I'm sure God's like, yeah, I'm going to give it to you for sure. Like it's yours. But how do you grow it? Like, let's do some things in our lives to help your joy grow. And I feel like celebrating others is a great way to make that happen. I think another thing on how to keep the voice of envy at bay is by like practicing the fruits of the spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Do you guys notice that all these things that are listed in the fruits of the spirit are pretty much like the opposite of the 7 deadly sins? I feel like when we practice the fruits of the spirit, they help us combat the 7 deadly sins. And these fruits of the spirit are from the Lord, but the 7 deadly sins are not. They're from the evil one, you know? And so I think practicing these things is like a good investment into your soul. I think another thing that is practical that we can do is to set boundaries. Give yourself space if you feel like you are struggling with envy. And sometimes envy, no, I'm going to take that back. I feel like oftentimes envy can be triggered from social media. You see something happening, you get like feelings of FOMO because someone's hanging out with someone else, or even you see them doing things or getting things or showing things off. And you're like, wait, like here I am, you know, like I don't have that. Do I need to have that? Wait, I should have that, right? Like it's so easy for our minds to start spiraling in that direction of, oh, wait, I need to have that, when really maybe we didn't need to have that. But social media can twist our thinking so that we feel like we need to have all these things. So if you feel like you're struggling, it's okay to mute social media. It's okay to mute certain accounts. Sometimes you even need to mute like some of the people that you know in real life and give yourself some space. You have permission to take up space and to like give space to yourself from other people. It doesn't have to be a forever thing. It could be like a seasonal thing. But really, if you're honest with what you're struggling with, set some parameters so that you protect yourself as you're going through the process of like reconciling those feelings. Another way to set up boundaries is to actually talk to an accountability partner or a trustworthy friend, and being just like super upfront about how you feel about a person or a thing or whatnot. I feel like when we just acknowledge the struggle and we are practicing vulnerability by admitting it to someone in our circle of trust, I feel like that's like a good release. And like you're like being super honest at that point when you're sharing it with someone, you know, and you're hearing your own thoughts out loud. I feel like that's a good way for us to kind of like give a release to our souls and to be able to like start the process of moving forward and reconciling it. Just limit your exposure, like setting up a boundary so that you limit exposures, limit your exposure from like things that are like a real struggle. It's not just social media. It could be like hanging out with someone. It could be TV. It could be a lot of different things. It's okay to kind of set boundaries in that as well. You know, I think it's important for us to hone in on the root of our envy, because I mean, like, you know, a lot of times when we feel envious, we kind of have to ask ourselves, like, okay, am I feeling envious right now because I'm feeling a lot of anxiety about something in my life right now? Or am I feeling fearful of something? Like, am I not trusting that God will actually pull me through the situation that I've been in? Do I feel like God is not faithful in my life? Like, there's a lot of reasons why we feel envious. And sometimes when we're kind of struggling with our trust, you know, like we're having trust issues with God, we're not really sure what He's doing in our lives, or we feel like we've just been in the same spot, or we feel stuck, it's really easy for us to start seeking after worldly comforts. But at the end of the day, it's not worldly comforts that will really feed our souls. It's the Lord. So I feel like, you know, having someone to talk to about that, seeking healthy resources to help you sort through all of that will be really good. And it'll be a really great way for you to keep that voice of envy at bay. So that is my talk with envy tonight. There's so much to unpack. I could go on and on about this. I mean, like, if you need an expert person on like struggles with envy, like I can give you a billion stories. And if you want someone to talk to, I am more than happy to talk to you offline. But I feel like this is a good start because, you know, even the question of like, have you ever felt envious of someone in this ministry? It's like crazy when we raise our hands, but we see so many people raising their hands and we're like, whoa, like you think that even like a student ministry that God had started would be protected from these feelings or these struggles, but no, not necessarily. Like we are so human. But who's bigger than all this? Like God is. We just need to release. We just need to release this to God, you know, just with open hands and a willing heart to change. And God will make it happen. He will equip you and He will bring people into your life to speak truth. He will bring resources. But we have to be honest with ourselves first. Like, okay, am I ready? Am I ready to face this like head on? So I'm going to end with that. I'm going to close this up in prayer. And then there will be 2 questions that I want you guys to discuss in your discussion groups. And then maybe whoever's doing that, you can add me to one of the groups as well. I would love to participate. So let me close this up in prayer. Father God, so many things, so many feelings, so many thoughts, I'm sure. Just a lot of things to sort through tonight, God, and into the upcoming weeks and the quarter ahead. But God, you are so faithful. And sometimes it's really hard. Like we're scared sometimes to put all of our trust in you, to know that you will take care of us, that you will pull us through, that you will honor us, you will guide us, you will provide for us, God. So many things that we want to be able to fully trust in, but sometimes it's hard. So I pray that tonight will be the night, God, that you will just break through those barriers, those chains that have held us down. May you just anoint us tonight, God. Speak directly to our hearts. Give us those quiet moments throughout the week to journal, to spend time with you, to really reflect. I think it's so important for us to spend time just really being honest with ourselves, God, because I feel like when we're honest with ourselves, that's when like a bunch of revelations come, God, and you are in those moments of healing, of comfort, and just giving us hope that, you know, your hand is over all of this and that you want to see us live lives that are worthy of you and that you will continue using us for your kingdom. So I pray that, God, you will stir in our hearts things that we feel convicted about. May we respond to them, and may we continue opening up our hearts for what's ahead. So I just thank you for this evening, and I pray all these in your name. Amen. All right.